The marker was the kind kindergarten teachers used to label cubbies. Cheap, fat-tipped, the red bleeding a little at the edges where it had soaked into the glossy school photo paper. My daughter's name was on the back in her own handwriting. Ivy Marlowe, room 204, Mrs. Petrie. Across her face, in capital letters that pressed so hard the marker had torn the photo near her left eye, someone had written, "Do not admit." Below that, smaller, almost as an afterthought, "Essie Surety Riskic." The guard at the gate, a man maybe 50 with a sunburn on the back of his neck, held the photo against my driver's side window like he was showing me a wanted poster. He had two of them. Ivy, age 9, and my son Beckett, age 6. Beck's photo had the same red ink, the same all-caps cruelty, except whoever had done it had drawn a slash through his mouth too, like they wanted to silence him before he could even speak. "Ma'am, I can't let you through." The guard wouldn't meet my eyes. He kept looking at a spot somewhere over my shoulder. The bride was very specific. "These two and you, she said you'd try to talk your way in." The bride, my half-sister. The woman whose engagement party I had funded, whose dress fittings I had driven her to, whose bachelorette in Charleston I had paid for in full because Dad said she was stressed and didn't. I remember what stress at her age felt like. 26. She was 26 and I was 34, and somehow that math had always meant I owed her something. I didn't argue with the guard. I want you to understand that because I've turned this moment over in my head 1,000 times since, and it still surprises me. There is no part of me that wanted to plead, no part that wanted to explain. I looked at the red marker on Ivy's photo, at the torn place near her eye, and I felt something inside me click shut. Like a deadbolt sliding home in a room I hadn't been inside in 20 years. "Okay," I said. The guard blinked. "Okay. Okay. Thank you for telling me." I shifted into reverse. "Hey, before I go any further, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I want to know who's here with me tonight. It helps. It really does." I backed the car down the long gravel drive of the estate. Bay Laurel Manor, that's what it was called. A converted winery in the Sonoma Hills with a chapel built out of reclaimed barnwood and a reception lawn that overlooked the vineyard. $82,000 I had wired to that venue. 42 for the rental, the rest for the bar package, the upgraded floral, the string trio for the ceremony, the chef's tasting menu my half-sister had insisted on after she'd seen something similar on a wedding planning account she followed. $82,000. From the settlement. My husband Daniel had been killed by a wrong-way driver on Highway 12 4 years ago. Beck had been 2. Ivy had been 5. Daniel had been 36. The other driver had been a contractor with a commercial policy, and after 18 months of mediation, the settlement had come through. I had paid off our house, I had set up the kids' college accounts, the rest was supposed to be a buffer, a cushion. The thing that meant I could keep working part-time until Beck was in 3rd grade, the thing that meant I didn't have to make Ivy take the bus when she had a fever. My father had called it Daniel's gift to the family. He had used that exact phrase sitting at my kitchen table 8 months ago. Daniel's gift to the family. As if my dead husband had passed away specifically so my half-sister could have a barnwood chapel. My phone was buzzing on the passenger seat. I looked down. "Dad." Then a text from him. "Where are you?" Then another. "Don't embarrass us." Then a call from my stepmother. Then my half-sister herself. 3 calls back to back. I let the phone scream itself hoarse. I drove down the gravel drive and out onto the access road, and I pulled over into the gravel turnout where the vineyard tour buses sometimes stopped to take pictures of the view. I scrolled to a contact I had saved 6 months ago when I first signed the venue paperwork. Mr. Hargrove was the events coordinator at Bay Laurel, a thin, nervous man with a clipboard and a stress problem. He'd given me his direct line. He'd said, any concerns at all, you call me, Mrs. Marlowe. I am your point of contact." He answered on the 3rd ring. I could hear violin music behind him, the bright fussy sound of a string trio tuning up. "Hargrove. Mr. Hargrove. It's Tessa Marlowe. I'm sitting outside your front gate and your security team has refused me entry on the orders of the bride. I'd like to walk you through where we go from here." There was a pause, the kind of pause where a person reorganizes their entire afternoon in their head. "Mrs. Marlowe, there must be, the bride's father said that you'd had a family disagreement, but I assumed, I don't pay you to assume things, Mr. Hargrove. I pay you to perform a contract. The contract has my name on it. Mine. Not my father's, not the bride's. Mine. And paragraph 6, subsection C of the rental agreement specifies that the contract holder retains right of access to the premises throughout the rental window. Do you remember that paragraph? You walked me through it yourself. Another pause. Longer. Right of access has been denied, Mr. Hargrove, by your own staff. Acting on the instructions of a non-signatory, that is a material breach. Per paragraph 9 of the same contract, a material breach by the venue voids the agreement and triggers full refund of all paid funds. The clock started about 4 minutes ago, when your guard pressed a photograph of my child against my window. Mrs. Marlowe, please, I'm not finished. Right now you're operating an event on a void contract. Your insurance does not cover that event. Your liquor license does not cover it. If a guest trips on a tent stake in the next hour, you are personally exposed. If your bartender pours a glass of champagne, you are personally exposed. You are at this moment holding a wedding for which there is no legal authorization. I checked the clock on the dash. 2:14. The ceremony is in 16 minutes, Mr. Hargrove. You have a choice to make. What? What choice? His voice had gone small. The string trio had stopped tuning. They were starting their pre-ceremony set. Pachelbel, of course. It was always Pachelbel. Choice 1. You apologize. You fire that guard at the gate, on the spot, in front of me. You escort me onto the property and you stand at my elbow until the bride's instructions about my children have been rescinded in writing. Choice 2. You shut it down, right now. Every light, every glass, every chair. You shut it down and you wire my $82,000 back into my account before sunset and we are done. I could hear him breathing. Mr. Hargrove, I work in commercial real estate compliance. I've been writing contracts like the one you signed for 11 years. I am not bluffing. I am not emotional. I'm sitting in my car and I am very, very calm. Make the choice. A long, ragged exhale. Then, I can't fire him. He's contracted through the security firm. I don't have authority. Then you've made the choice. Mrs. Marlowe, shut it down. I didn't hang up. I held the phone against my ear and I watched, in the rear-view mirror, the access road behind me. There was a low ridge between me and the estate, but I could see the upper portion of the white tent, the tip of it visible above the cypresses. I waited. I counted backward from 100 in my head, the way I used to do in labor. 93, 93, 86. The fountain on the entry plaza, the big one with the bronze cranes, suddenly stopped. I couldn't see it from where I was, but I heard it on the phone, behind Mr. Batterlice. Hargrove's panicked breathing. The water pressure cut and the splash sound just ended, like someone closing a door. 81, 78. The string trio cut off mid-phrase. Pockable, frozen in the middle of a measure. There was a confused little stutter from the violin, like she didn't believe her amplifier had actually gone dead, and then nothing. 73. The tent lights, which had been glowing soft and gold even in the afternoon sun, went dark in a wave. The microphone at the altar gave one piercing pop of feedback, and then it was just the hills, the wind, and the distant sound of 140 seated guests beginning to murmur. Mr. Hargrove, please send the refund confirmation to the email on file. I'll expect it within the hour. I hung up. My phone exploded again. Dad, stepmother, half-sister, her fiancé, a man named Royce I had met 3 times, an unknown number, another unknown number. I turned the ringer to silent. I dropped it face down on the passenger seat and I pulled back onto the road. The drive home was 40 minutes. The sun was doing that California thing where it gets gold and heavy in the late afternoon, lighting up the dust on my windshield. I had Daniel's old playlist still saved on my phone. I didn't put it on. I drove in silence and I let myself think about him for the first time in weeks. He would have told me to do it. That's the part nobody understood about Daniel. He was a soft man, soft-spoken, soft around the eyes, soft with the kids, but he had a vein of steel in him about who deserved his time and who didn't. After our wedding, he'd watched my family for about 6 months, and then one night in our apartment he said, very gently, Tess, I think your dad is using you. And I had laughed because that was what I did when someone tried to give me information I wasn't ready for. I laughed and I changed the subject, and Daniel, being Daniel, let me. He let me take 8 more years to figure it out on my own. I didn't figure it out, though. He died and then I figured it out. There's an order of operations to grief that nobody tells you about. First you lose the person. Then you lose the version of yourself you were when they were alive. And sometimes, if you're not paying attention, the people around you take the opportunity to remodel you while you're not looking. 8 months ago, my father had sat at my kitchen table while my half-sister scrolled wedding inspiration on her phone. He had put his hand over mine. He had said, "Mira deserves a beautiful day, Tess." After everything she's been through. Mira had been through, by my count, a breakup at 23 and a brief argument with a coworker. You have Daniel's gift. He'd want it spent on family. I had written him a check that night. The first one. $20,000 for the deposit, then 40 more for the venue upgrade, then 22 more for the catering and the florals and the trio. I had written those checks the way you peel off a bandage you've been wearing too long, slow, careful, automatic, not feeling it. I was the family fixer. That had always been my job. When my stepmother had run up a Nordstrom card to $12,000 and was hiding the bills, I cleared it. When my father's small business had needed a bridge loan in 2019, I'd written it. When Mira had dropped out of her cosmetology program and needed her first and last in security on a new apartment, I'd Venmo'd her. Every time I told myself it was love. Every time it had been rent. The price I paid to keep my chair at their table. I pulled into my driveway in Petaluma. The house was small. Daniel and I had bought it the month after we got married, a little 1962 ranch with a lemon tree in the side yard and a kitchen that still had the original tile. Ivy and Beck were at my friend Corinne's house. Corinne had the kids for the day so I could attend the wedding I had paid for. The wedding I'd been told repeatedly was a celebration of family. I sat in the driveway for a minute with the engine off. The phone was still buzzing on the passenger seat. I picked it up. There were 41 missed calls. There were 63 texts. I scrolled slowly, like a person reading somebody else's mail. From my father, "What have you done?" Then, a minute later, "Pick up." Then, 3 minutes later, "Pick up." Then, 3 minutes later, "You have humiliated this family." From my stepmother, "Tessa, I don't know what you think you accomplished, but you have in her life." From Mira herself, "You jealous biche. You couldn't stand to see me happy. You couldn't stand it, could you? Just because Daniel died doesn't mean the rest of us have to be miserable. You're a miserable widow and you wanted me to be miserable too. I hope you rot." That one I read twice. I read it twice and I felt something I hadn't felt in 4 years. I felt the pure, clean rage of being seen accurately for the first time. Not the rage of being misunderstood. The rage of being correctly identified as the obstacle. She had finally said the true thing. I was the obstacle. I had been the obstacle the moment I stopped writing checks. I went inside. I put the kettle on. I did the dishes from breakfast. The phone kept buzzing in my pocket, and at some point I realized Mira was live streaming. She'd tagged me. I clicked the link. She was in the parking lot of Bay Laurel in her dress, mascara streaking, and she was crying for the camera in that practiced way some people cry, where the tears come but the voice stays steady enough to perform. "My sister," she was saying. "My sister hacked the venue. She stole my wedding. She has been mentally unstable since her husband. I'm sorry, I can't." She gestured at her face, the artistic mascara. "Since her husband died, she has been jealous of me, of any happiness, and today please, if anyone watching is a lawyer, please." I closed the app. I stood at my kitchen sink for a long time, looking out the window at the lemon tree. This was the moment where, in the old version of me, the version that had existed up until about 90 minutes ago, I would have caved. I would have called my dad. I would have apologized. I would have told Hargrove it was a misunderstanding. I would have wired Mira $10,000 to make it right. I had a ledger in my body of how much each of these moments cost, and I could feel my hand reaching for the checkbook in my mind. Then my phone rang. An unknown number. A San Francisco area code. I almost didn't pick up. Something made me. "This is Tessa. Mrs. Marlowe, my name is Wendell Crane. I'm calling about my son, Royce." Wendell Crane. Royce was the groom. Wendell Crane. Royce was the groom. Wendell Crane was Royce's father. I had never met him. He'd flown in from Seattle that morning. Mira had been talking about him for a year and a half, a kind of low-frequency name-dropping that I'd half-tuned out. He was something in commercial real estate up in the Pacific Northwest. Big developments. The kind of person Mira called old money, which mostly meant he was solvent and his last name was on a building. "Mr. Crane, I'm sure you're calling to. I am not calling to threaten you, Mrs. Marlowe. I am calling because I just sat under a tent for 45 minutes while a girl in a wedding dress screamed that her widowed sister had hacked the lighting system, and I am no longer convinced that I understand what is happening at this wedding. I'd like the truth. From you." I told him. I told him about the gate, about the photographs, about the red marker and the slash through Beck's mouth. I told him the dollar amount. I told him about the contract. I told him I had been the one who shut the wedding down, and I told him exactly why, and I did not cry. When I was finished, there was a silence so long I thought he had hung up. "Mrs. Marlowe," he said finally. His voice had gone strange, quiet. the way a man's voice goes when he stopped being polite. Do you still have the photographs? They're with the security guard. He kept them when he sent me away. They have the red marker on them. I'd like to see them, tonight. Mr. Crane, Mrs. Marlowe, listen carefully. I need you to do 2 things. The first is, do not open your door for anyone tonight unless it's the police. The second is, if you have a security camera at your house, make sure it's running. My son is in a car right now with that young woman, attempting to comfort her. He has been told that his fiancée's sister had a psychotic break. I am going to clarify the situation for him. But first I am going to send a private security detail to your address. They will be there in approximately 35 minutes. I'm calling them now. That's Mr. Crane. That's not necessary. With respect, ma'am, I have been doing business in California for 30 years and I have known many people like the people in your family, and yes, it is necessary. People who are used to controlling a person through guilt do not respond rationally when guilt stops working. They escalate. They are escalating right now. I want my men at your front door before they get there. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I don't remember sitting down. I just realized I was on the floor, my back against the dishwasher. As for my son, Wendell Crane said, he will be making a decision tonight. He can call this off or he can find himself disinherited from a company that has been in my family for 4 generations. I do not tolerate cruelty to children, Mrs. Marlowe. Not in business, not in family, not anywhere. Mr. Crane. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Thank you. Don't thank me. You didn't ruin a wedding today, Mrs. Marlowe. You stopped your half-sister from marrying into a family that would have eventually figured her out, and then it would have been very ugly for everyone, including her. You did her a favor. She will never thank you for. Lock your doors. My team is on the way. He hung up. I stayed on the kitchen floor for a minute. The phone kept buzzing. I called Corinne. I asked her to keep the kids overnight. I told her there had been a thing at the wedding. Corinne, who's the kind of friend you don't deserve and somehow keep getting to have anyway, said only, "Are you safe?" I said I would be in about 35 minutes. She said, "I'll keep them till tomorrow afternoon. I love you." Lock your door, I cried then, for the first time, just for a second, and then I got up off the floor. I locked the door. I locked the slider to the back patio. I closed the blinds. I got Daniel's old aluminum bat out of the hall closet, where I kept it for the noise reasons more than any real plan, and I'd put it on the kitchen counter. I made another cup of tea. 28 minutes later, my phone rang. Hargrove. The venue manager. Mrs. Marlowe. His voice was a wreck. Your stepmother and your half-sister are in my office. They have what they're claiming is a power of attorney. They're demanding I refund the $82,000 to a card they've provided. I've told them I can only refund the original payment method and they're… Mr. Hargrove, stop. Listen to me. I was very calm now, the same calm as in the car. That document is fraudulent. I have not signed any power of attorney ever. The card you refund to must match the wire I sent. If you refund any other party, that is wire fraud, and at the dollar amount we are discussing, it is a federal felony for you personally, not the venue. Do you understand? Yes. I want you to call the Sonoma County Sheriff. Right now, while we're on the phone. Tell them you have 2 women in your office attempting to commit fraud with a forged document. I will email you, in the next 90 seconds, my proof of payment, my photo ID, and a written instruction confirming I am the only authorized recipient of any refund. Do not let them out of that office. I hung up. I emailed the documents. I checked the cameras at the front of my house, which Daniel had installed the year before he died and which I had kept up out of a feeling I couldn't name. The driveway was empty. 6 minutes later, headlights, a black SUV, then a second one behind it. 2 men got out of the first, a woman out of the second. They were dressed plainly, dark clothes, nothing tactical. The taller man came up to the door and stood about 6 feet back from it, hands visible. He didn't ring the bell. He just stood there. The other 2 took up positions at the corners of the property. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't know. "This is Marcus with the Crane detail. We're in position. We won't approach the door. We're just here. Stay inside." I texted back, "Thank you." He replied, "Ma'am, we're going to be here all night. You can sleep." I sat down at the kitchen table. I put my hands flat on the wood. I waited. It was 23 minutes before the next car came. It was my father's Lincoln. He pulled into the driveway and stopped halfway up. The taller man at my door, Marcus, turned slightly. He didn't move toward the car. He just turned and he stood and he watched. My father got out. My stepmother got out. My stepmother got out. And then Mira got out in her wedding dress, the hem dragging in the gravel, mascara smeared down to her jawline. The dress was torn at the bottom. I don't know how it had torn. My father started yelling before he was halfway up the walk. I could hear him through the door. Tessa. Tessa. You open this door. You open this door right now. Do you hear me? You have humiliated us in front of 300 people. You have. Marcus stepped slightly into his path. Not aggressively. Just present, sir. The homeowner has asked not to be disturbed. Who the hell are you? Get off my daughter's property. I'm here at the request of a third party, sir. Please, return to your vehicle. Mira shoved past my father. She came up the walk in her dragging dress and her face had gone past performance and into something else. Something that scared me more than the marker on the photographs. She wasn't crying. She was past crying. She was past crying. Tessa, open the door. Open it. Open it. You Alice. I watched her on the camera feed. I watched her bend down by the path, the one Daniel had laid himself the summer before he died, and pick up one of the river rocks I'd lined the flower bed with. She straightened up. She drew her arm back. Marcus moved. He had been about 12 feet from her, and he closed the distance in maybe 3 steps, and he caught her wrist before the rock left her hand. He didn't tackle her. He didn't yell. He just held her wrist, the rock still in her fist, and he said calmly, "Ma'am, you're going to put that down," Mira screamed. Not a word, just a sound, and the woman from the second car was already on her radio and I could hear from somewhere down the street a siren starting up. Wendell Crane had not just sent security, he had told them to call the sheriff the second anyone showed up. The deputy arrived in about 4 minutes. By the time he pulled up, Marcus had walked Mira back to the edge of the lawn and was holding her there, gently, by the elbow, while she cycled through screaming and weeping and screaming again. My father was standing on the walk with his hands on his hips, telling everyone within earshot that this was a misunderstanding. My stepmother was on her phone, hissing into it. The deputy was a young man, maybe 28. He looked at Marcus, who showed him a license. He looked at the rock, which Marcus had set down on the porch step. He looked at the smashed driver's side window of my father's Lincoln, which I hadn't even noticed, and which Mira had apparently broken with her fists somewhere between the venue and my house. He looked at Mira, in the dress with the torn hem and the bloody knuckles, and he said, "Ma'am, can you step over here, please?" I watched the cameras. I watched my half-sister be put in the back of a sheriff's vehicle. I watched my father try to talk the deputy out of it, and I watched the deputy not be talked out of it. I watched my stepmother wail and sit down in my driveway and put her face in her hands. I watched my father look up at my house and my closed front door, and I watched his face go through several things, and the last thing it went through was something I had never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment. Calculation. The face of a man recalculating which daughter was now the more valuable asset. I didn't open the door. I didn't go out. I let the deputy tell them to leave. I let Marcus stand on my walk until the last car pulled away. Then I sat on my couch and I shook for about 20 minutes, all the calm I'd been running on, draining out of me at once. My phone buzzed. An email. From Bay Laurel Manor. Subject line, refund confirmation. $82,047 wired to my account, the 47 being some interest on the deposit they'd been holding. The email was signed by Mr. Hargrove and copied to the venue's attorney. A second email came a minute later, from an address I didn't recognize, marked Private. "Mrs. Marlowe, my son has called off the engagement. He saw the photographs. He is not the man I was afraid he might be, and I am grateful for that. You will never hear from me again unless you wish to. If you do, my number is below. Take care of those children. W. Crane." I read it 3 times. Then I deleted it, not out of rudeness, but out of a feeling that I didn't want to carry it around. The favor was done. The favor did not need to be a relationship. Corinne brought the kids home the next afternoon. Beck ran straight to me and put his head against my stomach the way he does, and Ivy, who is older and watches me more carefully, looked at the boarded-up window where Mira's rock had hit. We hadn't replaced the glass yet. The glazier was coming Monday. "Mom," Ivy said. "What happened?" I knelt down. I put one hand on her shoulder and one on Beck's. I said, "Some people in our family did a very mean thing, and I had to make a hard decision to keep us safe, and I made it. And we're going to be okay." Ivy looked at me for a long second. She has Daniel's eyes. She said, "Are we going to see Grandpa anymore?" "Not for a while, baby." "Okay," she said. And then after a minute, "Good. We ordered pizza. We ate it at the kitchen table with the boarded window behind us and the lemon tree dropping hard green fruit onto the side patio in the wind. Beck told me about a bug Corinne's cat had eaten. Ivy showed me a drawing she'd done of our house with all three of us on the roof, which was apparently a safer place than inside in her current understanding of houses. I blocked my father, my stepmother, and Mira on every channel I had access to that night after the kids went to bed. It took about 40 minutes. There were more accounts than I expected. Old emails, a Venmo, a shared Spotify, a photo cloud my stepmother had access to from years ago. I cleaned all of it. Each block was a small sound, like a deadbolt. Click, click, click. I stood in the kitchen after, in the dark, with the moon coming in over the boarded window, and I thought about what Wendell Crane had said on the phone. You didn't ruin a wedding, you stopped a merger. He was wrong, though. I figured it out, standing there. I hadn't stopped a merger. I had stopped a transaction. Mine. The one that had been running in the background of my whole life, the standing order that drained me every month into the accounts of people who had never loved me back. I'd stopped paying. And the ledger had gone quiet, and the house was mine, and the kids were mine, and the $82,000 was back in my account, and Daniel's gift, the actual gift, the one he'd left me whether he meant to or not, was the realization that I didn't have to keep buying my place at a table I didn't even like sitting at. I went upstairs. I checked on Beck, who was asleep on his stomach the way he always slept, one arm hanging off the bed. I checked on Ivy, who was awake, reading by the light of the hallway. "Hey," I said. "Hey, you okay?" She thought about it. She was 9. She thought about it the way a 40-year-old would. "I think so, Mom." "Yeah, baby, you did good today." I had to leave the doorway for a second. I stood in the hall and I pressed my hands against my eyes, and then I came back in and I kissed the top of her head and I told her to go to sleep. I went to my own room. I lay down on my side of the bed, the side I'd been keeping for 4 years, and I felt, for the first time since Daniel died, like I'd stopped paying rent on a life I didn't want to live. Like I was, finally, the one writing the checks that mattered. Like the deadbolt had slid all the way home. The lemon tree dropped another piece of fruit onto the patio. The boarded window held. The kids slept. I closed my eyes. I've thought a lot in the months since about the math of how I got there in the first place. $82,000 is not a number you arrive at by accident. It's a number you arrive at one small surrender at a time. A deposit here. An upgrade there. A we're family at the kitchen table when you're tired and grieving and somebody's hand is on yours. I didn't lose myself the day I wrote the first check. I lost myself across 1,000 smaller days, going back to when I was 9 years old, and figured out that being useful to my father was the closest thing to being loved by him I was ever going to get. The thing nobody tells you about being the family fixer is that you don't notice you're paying rent until you stop paying. The bill stops coming and the silence is so loud it scares you, and you almost reach for the checkbook just to make the silence stop. That's the moment, I think. That's the only moment that matters, whether you let the silence happen or whether you pay to make it go away. I almost paid. I want to be honest about that. Standing at my kitchen sink, watching Mira live stream her mascara, I had my thumb half laid in my father's name. The reason I didn't was not strength. It was Ivy and Beck building a fort in the living room, oblivious. The reason was that the people who had ruined my afternoon had decided on paper, in red marker, that my children were unfit to be in a room with them. And there is a place inside a mother that the rest of you cannot vote against. I found that place. I stood on it. What Mira did to herself is the cleanest example of cause and effect I have ever lived through. She raised the hand. She threw the rock. She sat in the back of that sheriff's car, not because I betrayed her, but because she finally met a wall she couldn't manipulate. The wall was the truth. The truth was that her sister had finally stopped paying. If I could put one thing in your pocket, the kind of thing you carry around and touch sometimes when you need it, it would be this. The people who tell you that family is unconditional are usually the ones billing you. Real love does not send invoices. Real love does not draft photographs of children with red marker. Real love does not require you to be smaller so that someone else can feel bigger. Be decent to people. Be smart about who you let near your money and your kids. And when the moment comes, and it will come, be brave enough to let the silence happen. The silence is not the end of love. Sometimes the silence is the first honest thing the room has ever said. I am still afraid sometimes. I check the locks twice. The kids are okay. We planted a second lemon tree.